Hugh Panaro, welcome to Cultural Attaché.
Hey, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Now, you're going to be a busy guy on the West Coast starting at the end of this week with shows at Feinstein's at the Nico in San Francisco, then a show in Los Angeles, and concluding with a show in Palm Springs.
Well, you
Uh,
got my whole itinerary.
it is your itinerary as the man behind the mask. So I felt it was only appropriate to start with asking you about something that Andrew Lloyd Webber told Charles Spencer in The Telegraph in 2013. He said, "What strikes me is that there's a very fine line between success and failure. Just one ingredient can make the difference." What do you think is that one ingredient that you have that has made a difference for you in your career?
Oh, that's a great question. I think if I have um, one good trait, I think I can be objective. I've always known when I've done a bad audition. And I usually know if I've done a good audition, and it's the kind, it's the in between. And I've gotten better at it as I've gotten older, I think, to be more objective and um not hopefully not be too delusional. Really kind of see myself hopefully the way other people can see me. That's a horrible answer.
Well, the interesting thing about an audition is all you can do is the best you can do. You have no control over how people respond to that.
Right.
So I have to assume there have been good auditions where you've never heard a thing after that. And obviously the better auditions are the ones where you do. But I mean, how do you as an actor, even this far into your career, own that you did the best in any given situation and not worry about the result?
Well, that's where I got to put my money where my mouth is. Whenever I do master classes with young people, I always tell them the same thing. I'm like a little broken record player that there is only one you. And the best thing you can do is be the most authentic version of yourself so that people see you. And don't try to be somebody else that you're not. When I first moved to New York, Mandy Patinkin was it. Uh, and I was obsessed. I thought, oh my gosh, he's just the best thing on two legs. And I'm a pretty good mimic. And I just thought they wanted Mandy Patinkin. So I would kind of go in a lot of times and do my best, what they were looking for. And it wasn't until this really smart piano player, musical director, I should say, Michael Biaggi, didn't know me from Adam, and he saw me out in at the Equity Lounge, at the Actors Equity Lounge. That's like where everyone goes to die, and it's just like such a sad building. And he saw me on a break, and he said, "Hugh, I know we don't know each other, but may I give you some advice?" And I said, "Yes, please." He said, "You do a really good Mandy," and I was like, "Oh." He got it. He kind of got what I was doing. And he said, but if they want Mandy, they're going to get Mandy. You need to figure out who you are, bring that to the table, and some people are going to like it, some people are not. But at least they'll know who they're hiring. And it was the best advice anyone ever gave me.
All
Oh,
right. Well, that begs the obvious question. Can you still sound like Mandy Patinkin?
maybe.
So how would Mandy Patinkin sing the music of the night?
Well, give me a cocktail before we do that.
Yeah, well, we're going to finish the conversation with a with bringing up cocktails, but
All right,
we'll maybe by the time we get there, you'll
we'll
be
get that.
loosened up enough.
Warming up.
Yeah, exactly. So the show that you're going to be doing on the West Coast is your show Man Without a Mask, which started in New York at 54 Below. How has the show evolved since you first did it, or is it the same beast?
It's definitely evolved, and I will take you back another 2.0 version. The first time I had actually done something like this was actually in Palm Springs, and it was really just kind of like my musical director Joseph Falcon and I put something together, and we were having fun, and my friend and now director, old friend and now director, Richard J. Alexander, came to see the show in Palm Springs. And I was a nervous wreck because he can be brutal. I mean, he can just like lay you out like easy. So I got a text saying that, hey, I'm coming to your final performance with Mark Sendroff. And I remember saying to Joseph, I'm like, oh my God, this is going to either be a nightmare or okay. And we just did our show. Again, I tried to own what I preached. I just did the most authentic version of myself. And Richard and Mark came backstage afterwards, and he was actually really kind, and he didn't like, say anything that I burst into tears. But he did say, I think you need a director, and if you're interested, I'd like to talk to you. So we all went out for greasy hamburgers afterwards, and one of the first things he asked me, he's like, Husky, why are you singing that song about dogs? I don't know if you know the song from Lucky Stiff called Times Like
I
This.
do.
Okay. So that was one of my sh songs and kind of mid show, I'd say, not in the beginning, not in the end, mid show. And he's like, why are you singing that song about dogs? I was like, I love dogs. And he's like, that's not specific enough. He's like,
Well,
you
and I'm
have
assuming he didn't know that you at first thought you wanted to be a veterinarian too.
did. I think he did. I mean, because everyone knows that. It's like that's like all over the internet. Like and that was one of the things I got to do a production. I'm backtracking, but I'll just catch up. I got to do a production of Music Man, a concert version with Shirley Jones was Mrs. Peru. And I was so excited to find out during rehearsals that she too wanted to be a veterinarian before she became Shirley Jones. And so everybody knows that I'm an animal freak. And Richard knew that, but he just like, why are you singing that song? And I love dogs. He goes, but you have a career and you need to really focus on that and bring people up to date of your own musical journey. You don't talk about Showboat. You don't talk about Martin Guerre. There were a lot of things that we just didn't put in the show because I don't know. I guess I thought it was not interesting, or people would think it was old fashioned. And I love dogs. So anyhow, we that was when Richard hopped on board, and then Joseph and I and Richard went into a rehearsal studio and just sang through everything you can possibly imagine. Songs that were from the Red Shoes. That was a huge flop in my life. And just other things that I loved to do. Um, there still isn't anything from Sunny in the Park with George is one of my favorite shows. I saw Mandy and Bernadette, and then I got to do a great production with Sam Buntrock. And yet there were so many songs that just didn't make the cut because you can't keep people there for 4.5 hours.
Well, that depends. I mean, they're sitting through one act of Wicked that currently runs 2 hours and 40 minutes in theaters.
Have you seen it?
Yes.
You have? I'm jealous.
Yeah.
I tried to see it this weekend. Sold out, sold out, sold out, sold out. In my tiny little farm town in Connecticut.
Yeah, it's a it's a true movie. Like anybody who loves, well, you'll appreciate this reference. When movies were movies,
Yeah.
this is that kind of movie.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait. I can't
Yeah,
wait. I have a little fun fact for you that not many people know,
sure.
that when the 1 year of my life that I lived in California, my roomie was Kristen Chenoweth. And
Wow.
during that time, Kristen was doing this new workshop of a new musical called Wicked. And it was just that was in 2000. That was the birth of Wicked. And it was
Well,
these.
and I can add to that. I actually saw the out of town production in San Francisco.
Did you?
I did. It's a very different show than the one that's
Right
on
at the
Broadway.
Byrd Theater.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it, and they made some very smart changes in the show from that out of
Well,
town layout.
I didn't get to see it out of town. I saw it on Broadway, I think about 5 times. The thing was because every time you have a friend, my criteria now for going to see things, do I have a friend in it? And I had so many friends that were either Elfie or Galinda, and I would go back and see like combination number one, combination number three, and oh, so and so's going on tonight. It's always fun.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
but
So
the night.
when you did the sorry, when you did the show in Palm Springs, was this sort of under the radar, more at like the Purple Room as opposed to being at a bigger venue?
No, no, it was at the art museum, and it was a big thing, and not under the radar at all. I had been to Palm Springs a few times before with Ron Abel, who's just magnificent, and he actually we do one of my favorite songs that I do is his arrangement, and the way I hooked up with Joseph Falcon was because I called Ron to go back to Palm Springs because Ron and I had done it, I think back in 2000 or something like that, the one year I lived in LA. And Ron was like, "Oh, Huey, I'm already committed to play with Lucy because he plays, for Lucy Arnaz." And so I was like, "Oh my God, who am I going to get to play for me?" And I had met Joseph Falcon through my friend Liz Calloway. We did a Christmas gig together called Mistletoe Magic, and Joseph was just the kindest, most talented man on the planet. And I called him, and he said yes. So that was our first, but that was really the closest thing to Man Without a Mask was probably that incarnation that Richard J. Alexander saw and then started excavating and trimming all the dog songs.
Well, it's not like there was a plethora of them in the first place,
No,
unless you were doing How Much Is That Doggy in the Window or, really digging deep for trivial songs.
right. Yeah.
Well, you have a recording of the show, so do you think fans come to you hoping to hear that in person, or do you want to offer them more?
Well, you're really good at this. So I know seriously, I'm not just blowing air up your tutu. You're really good question.
God, and my
So
tutu's off screen. How you even knew I had one on
that's the
amazes
thing
me.
about Zoom. No one knows what we're wearing below.
Exactly.
Um, so a lot of I always say that the CD that we released is a very good template for what people are going to see, but it always changes a little bit based on a couple of things. I do like to sing everything and stay all night and sing them all. So, but some venues are very strict with we had like, so for instance, we did Crazy Cocks in London and it was a very hard 70-minute show because they had another show after us. And so we had to cut, and I also had guest stars. And so we would add, a solo for my guest star for Liz Calloway, and then we'd do a duet. So we had to go, well, okay, well, what two songs from Man Without a Mask can we live with? So again, Richard and Joseph and I would kind of brainstorm, and they would usually win because they're the more creative than I am. I'm just a talent, and we would change the show every single night. For instance, at Catalina, my dear friend Lisa Vroman has said yes to singing with me, and so we're going to get to do a reunion moment together, and so obviously we can't go all night, so we'll probably have to trim some numbers, but. With Catalina, I believe there's only one show that night, so I might go long.
Well, I was fascinated by an interview that I saw that you gave to Broadway World, where you said you were like an elephant and that you remember everything. So I want to know what you can tell me about appearing in What's a Nice Country Like You doing in a state like this in the mid 80s.
I can tell you so much. I love that show. I can tell you, I will. So I remember my audition for that show was at the Actors Playhouse in the Village in New York City, and it was a lot of improv, and I sang a song for my audition from Little Me called "I Love You as Much as I Am Able." originally done by Sid Caesar. And in the revival, it was Victor Garber. Um, but I went in, and basically the audition was they would ask you to sing your audition song, and then they say, okay, now we want you to sing it like an Italian dictator. Now we want you to sing it like a lounge lizard. And now we want you to sing it like a 12-year-old girl. And it was so much fun. And we were all there for hours because they kept pairing us together. And at one point, I think it was the final callback, they said I was in, let's say at maybe 1 p.m. for about an hour. And they said, can you come back around 4? And I didn't, it was too close to, I lived all the way uptown, so I couldn't get uptown and go home. So I went to a Mexican restaurant called La Cantina, and I might have had a few margaritas. So by my callback time around 4 p.m., I was game. Anything they could have asked me to like hang from the chandelier and sing "I love you" as much as I am able. I was so ready and um, just had the time of my life. And it had been done at a few theaters earlier with Brent Barrett, and I'm trying to think of some of the other cast members, but the same Carrie and Suzanne Hoffman. Uh, Suzanne was in the original production, and she was our director. And we opened in this tiny little theater off Broadway, which had just been the home to Torch Song Trilogy. And the ceiling was literally caving in. It was plaster was falling. So I guess Harvey Firestein and everybody, they had stapled fabric to the ceiling to catch all the plaster. So we were kind of living in this cool bohemian theater that the Torch Song cast had created. And do you remember the movie Dirty Dancing?
Of who doesn't?
Okay, so there was an actress in What's a Nice Country named Jane Brooker. And Jane Brooker played uh, baby's sister in Dirty Dancing, and she did the hula, I really wanna. And so that's Jane, Missy Baldino, Rob Resnick, Stephen Mulch. I remember these are people that are so formative in my life, and the five of us were so close. And it was my first thing. I think I can tell you I made $80 a week because it was non-union, and I didn't care. Craig. I just I was so happy to be working off Broadway in New York, and it was just one of those things I literally got from circling with a red magic marker in Backstage back then. That's how we did it. And it was also special because my pop-up, my grandfather, was still alive, and they brought him up in his wheelchair from Philadelphia, and he didn't quite understand the concept of the fourth wall. And when I came out, he actually pushed himself out of his chair and stood up and waved.
Oh, that's adorable.
It was honestly one of the sweetest moments that I can actually remember.
Well, and as we've already established, you can remember everything. Um, so I've seen you in two shows.
Uh-oh.
I saw you in Les Mis,
Uh-huh.
but the show that really made me go wow was I saw you at Barrow Street Theater as Sweeney Todd. Not bad for somebody from LA, I guess.
Oh, I love that's another one. Well, go ahead. I don't want to keep babbling.
Well, I know that that Annie introduced you to the world of musical theater, and I believe that Sweeney Todd introduced you to the world of musical theater as religion, because that's what it was for me when I saw that. But you tell a great story about Len Cariou doing Epiphany and jumping down with the knife right at the lip of the stage and things like that. When you have a memory as profound as that, how does that influence how you approach that same role many decades later?
Well, Len Cariou was my Sweeney. He's who I saw. I remember I did not get to see Victor Garber. I remember Chris Groendahl had taken over the role. So I remember they were my cast, but um, part of the reason I was taken to see that show was my mom said Huey, you need to see this woman. Her name is Angela Lansbury. You don't need to see her in Bedknobs and Broomsticks, which I loved, or on a television a movie, a guest star. You need to see this woman live on a stage because she is magic. My mom had seen her in Maine, and my mom was right. And again, I don't know how she pulled it off, but we had house seats, and I was about the fourth or fifth row on the aisle. And Len literally leapt. I mean, he didn't leap. He flew from Mrs. Lovett's pie shop down to the lip of the stage and looked at me with his razor and scared the heck out of me. And that is a memory that will never go away. And then, of course, it came to Philadelphia, and I got to see it again. This time with George Hearn and Angela Lansbury and the touring company. So I had a few role models to pull from, and then of course, again, I got to go back to what I practice, what you preach. You can't do anyone. You can't be an imitation. I couldn't just imitate Len. I had to find my Sweeney. What can you bring to the role? And it was very interesting because Bill Buckhurst was our director. That he started it in London at the little pie shop and came to New York. And I actually had to audition for Bill on Zoom because he was in London. And they sent a lot of videos to him because I lobbied for this role. Um, uh, it was not something that they were, beating my door down to hire me. I was like, my best friend is Norm Lewis, and he was playing it off Broadway, and I knew he was leaving. And I started lobbying for this role and um, I did a few auditions via video and then had a Zoom just like we're doing now with Bill in London. And he asked me some questions and gave me his ideas on the role. And I said, I am willing to trust you completely. And this was fascinating because what I talk about to students about bringing everything of yourself to a role, I actually had to kill off a lot of what naturally is me to do this version of Sweeney because Bill said, Hugh, he was very sweet. He's like, Hugh, you're very goofy and gregarious and very quick to smile. Pisces are quick to smile, something I read when I was little. And he said, and that does not work for my vision of Sweeney. And it's kind of like, the swear jar with a quarter. Every time you swear, you got to give him a quarter. He said, every time I see Hugh, I'm going to clock you and just say, I can see like even like the beginning of like charm or the beginning of a smile. And one of the greatest compliments I got was from a friend of mine that said, we didn't recognize you in this role because you were so dark and dead inside. And I credit that to Bill Buckhurst. And it was a gorgeous, and Carolee Carmello is one of my dearest friends too. So it
Yeah,
was
who's killing it in Kimberly Akimbo right now on the road, by the way.
magic.
All right. Well, I think you have your own moment that's very much like you had with Len Carey when you were in that fourth row, because I was seated in the rows of seats behind the table, sort of at the back of the house.
Huh?
And I remember you jumping up onto the railing
Yes.
during one of the songs, and I'm going, holy, it's like that's that is it's already a palpable performance, but when it's that physically in front of your face, it doesn't get any more controversial, not controversial, confrontational than that.
Yeah, I love that. And again, that's all Bill Buckhurst. That's his original staging. And he that was one of the things he said to me. He said, you know how shows run and things morph and maybe one actor feels it a different way. He said, I am going to be a stickler with you. I want you to do every stitch of my original vision that we did in London, and I'm going to restore some things that maybe have not been in the show for a while. Are you game? I said, bring it on. So there were moments where literally like doing sliding on your chest across a table And it was very aggressive, and not every audience member in an immersive production gets it. And I remember one time I put my razor to a gentleman's throat, very much like you're talking about, and he went pushed my hand away quite violently. And there were many different reactions. Some people would giggle, some people were really scared, and then there were some people that were confrontational, especially the night that I missed a step. And instead of standing mid-table, I landed on three people's laps. And didn't break character and had to climb my way back off their laps onto the table and pick up right where we were in Epiphany. And it was so disorienting because I didn't know what happened. I literally missed a step and I was like, thank God I wasn't on the floor, I guess.
Well, but in the heat of that moment, in the heat of that song, almost anything goes, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the beauty of it. Well, I
Yeah.
want
It's kind of fun playing a crazy person.
Oh, of course it is. Of course it is. As long as you can leave it at the stage door and go home and not take it on.
What's interesting was, and I only played the role for about 6 months, and they asked me to renew, and I probably would have dramatically, but one of the things I had to do to really embody this character, I had to get my voice so low and real bass baritone. And for 6 months, I like lived down there. I would go around literally growling like and keeping my larynx in a really low position. And I had a pre-negotiated symphony gig mid-run. And one of the songs that I sing in concert is Maria from West Side Story. I love that song. And from doing Sweeney so long, when I went to sing Maria, the A naturals felt like high C's. I was struggling. And I realized by keeping my voice down there for so long, I started to lose a lot of my top notes. And I thought, this is kind of my bread and butter. And I had a really honest talk with them. I said, I would love to stay as long as you would have me, but I don't want to get into a situation where I have vocal issues from doing this. And that is something that this is folklore, but it's also true. Len Cariou really hurt his voice with all the yelling and the screaming. And I was aware of that. Len actually played full circle moment. Len played Captain Andy in Showboat with me, so he played my father-in-law briefly, and we called him Captain Todd. And I was very aware of what was going on vocally. I was like, wow, I'm really struggling with my high notes that used to fall out of my mouth easily, and now I'm like, okay. So I was smart, and I did 6 months, and then I was like, okay, onward.
Well, let's talk about some of your high notes because I want to ask you about three songs and have you tell me which is the most challenging for you as a singer and as an actor to perform. One of them is obviously Music of the Night, which has high notes. There's also Kiss Me, which becomes the quartet in Sweeney Todd, which has its share of high notes. And then there is Later in A Little Night Music, which is I that passage that Henrik gets to, which is just I marvel at anybody who can do that. So from your perspective, you know, which of those is the most challenging and why?
Well, first of all, again, I got to say, I'm blown away. You've really done your homework because Henrik was one of my favorite roles I ever got to do. I played it a few times when I was a youngster, and I loved it. And not that long ago, I got to relive that moment in a symphony concert. And I will tell you right off the top of my head, um, that is so hard and exposed. That's a B natural. And it's similar to the same thing with 24601 in Les Mis, in Who Am I? And but when I was playing Henrik, I would just obsess over that note every night in my dressing room. And, oh gosh, sorry, phone ringing. Oh, sorry. Ruin our Zoom. Um, we're live. And I would sing later in my dressing room and warm up quite often, making sure the note was there because that's just something you don't want to wipe out on, and that's just dreadful. So for me, I would say that was the hardest of the three you mentioned. Later is definitely up there. Um, Kiss Me was just so much joy. Um, you probably know this because you know everything about me already, that you've done your homework. My Joanna was Celia Keenan Bolger. Magnificent and just such a gorgeous actress as well as singer. And we were young. We were the right age for Anthony and Joanna. And what I remember about that was Stephen Sondheim stopping rehearsal and saying, Hugh, can I give you a quick note? I'm like, yeah. He said, you're being very, I grew up Catholic, good little Catholic boy. He said, you're being so exact with what I wrote, and I appreciate it. He said, but you don't have to sing everything I wrote exactly. He said, if you speak, you don't have a gate. Instead of you don't have it, I was singing, you don't have a gate. And he's like, just trust me, you'll get a big laugh. Just speak that line and you'll get a big laugh. So I started speaking, you don't have a gate to Joanna, and I would get a big laugh because he's Stephen Sondheim and he knows everything. So
Well, and yet, if I remember correctly from the recording of the show Man Without a Mask, is that didn't he stop you in a rehearsal or at the end of the first act because you were singing along to you were mouthing the lyrics to all the
you are
songs of the
you
show?
are this, and that is, again, that is such a true story. People think I'm, it's like, no, we were all nervous with Stephen Sondheim watching us do our very, very, very first sing through. And the stage manager said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take 10 minutes. And I was on my way to the restroom, and Stephen Sondheim goes, hey, Hugh, come. And I was like, hi, hi, Mr. Sondheim. And he's like, how are you? I said, I'm great. How are you? He said, I'm very well. And he said, you know every word to my score, don't you? I said, yes, Mr. Sondheim. He said, yeah, you're mouthing everyone's lyrics. You might want to stop that. And it was true because, again, Sweeney, like you said, that's religion. I did know every word. And I was singing along with, not out loud, but I was mouthing all of Christine Baranski's lyrics during Worst Pies in London. And Pirelli, everybody, I knew everybody's part and was just so enthusiastic. I was just sitting. I didn't know I was doing it, but he clocked me.
Now we are at the end of our 30 minutes, but if you have some more time,
I do, of course. I'm
okay,
a
great. I just want to be respectful of that, but I want to tell you a story because I saw Angela Lansbury's last performance as Mrs. Lovett because they finished the tour here. And I had gone a couple weeks earlier with my aunt who wanted to leave at intermission, and I went out to the box office to get a ticket for another show, not knowing it was the last performance. During A Little Priest, there was a moment where Mrs. Lovett hits the dough in the bowl, and somebody wanted to play a practical joke on her and George Hearn, and they put a bunch of flour in there. So when she hit it, flour flew all over both of them. The orchestra had to vamp probably for 2.5 minutes because they were laughing so hard. Which
Oh,
also works in that moment somehow.
brilliant. Brilliant. And especially with her, the music hall approach that she took, I'm sure she had a blast.
She did. I had the privilege of interviewing her once and asked her if she ever found out who did that and what memory she had of that. She goes, I do remember that. And I remember thinking at the time, who could have done this? Why would they do this? And this was fun.
Yeah, I mean, look, I really I try to be really professional on stage, but once in a while, you know, there are the practical jokes that happen. And she's actually talking about Wicked. Carol Shelley, who originated the role on Broadway, is it Madame Marble? Did I say it right? She was Parthy in Showboat with me, and we would play pranks on each other. And I would hand her my child, little Kim, right before she had to sing, "Why do I love you? Why do you love me?" And I would hand Carol every night this doll wrapped in swaddling clothing. And I don't know what possessed me, but one night I put a price tag on the baby's face that said like $1 or something like that. And I handed it to Carol, and I could see she was like, so this went on, and then she was great about it. She just, cussed me out lovingly. But then she waited a week, and the reprise of You Are Love, I have to pick up my luggage, my suitcase, and my cane in my suitcase and exit the stage. And Carol had one of the stagehands put a 50-pound weight in my preset bag. So that when I went to pick it up, it was like, oh, and I look in the wings, and there she is, just like this, with this big smile. So she got me good. So I don't like to play pranks, but once in a while they're cute.
You mean like putting Norm Lewis's face in your makeup on your last performance of Phantom of the Opera?
Yeah, I did that.
Yeah. You can thank Seth Rudetsky for letting us all know about that one.
That loves that story, and he's got like a close up. I sent him a close up of the image, which actually it was quite creative on my part because from stage, the audience, no one could see it. It just looks like part of the makeup. So only Christine Dyer could see Norm Lewis's face. And but I will say, Norm played Javert opposite Maya Valjean, and we never once cracked up on stage, and we kept it so professional. And
Well,
I'm
you
very
can't crack up between those two characters. There's so much animosity that Javert has for Jean Valjean that would have ruined the show.
Yeah. But we speak a shorthand. When you're close, you speak a shorthand, and all it would have taken was like a raised eyebrow, and he could have made me laugh, or vice versa. But we behaved.
Right. Now, I know the other question I want to ask you, you've been asked a lot, but I want to dig deeper on it. Um, you know, I did some research. Bruce Springsteen's best known song is probably Born to Run.
Mhm.
Bruce Springsteen, over the course of a 50 plus year career, has sung that song 1,861 times. That's over 50 years. So he can do different arrangements. He can have different band members. Obviously, how a band plays each night can be very just as somebody does it in a show, it can vary a little bit. But you've sung Music of the Night more than 200 times, 2,000 times rather. And I know it's your job to make that fresh and for you and for the audience. But we all have those moments where we're going, oh God, I have to do this again. Or, oh my God, I have to go to this meeting, or whatever it is that we do in our daily lives. How did you overcome those moments where the idea of singing Music of the Night was something that you just thought, I just don't have it tonight. I don't have the passion for it.
Well, that's interesting. And I don't want to sound like Pollyanna. The passion's never been the problem because, like, as I talk about in the show and on the CD, I'm not going to lie to you. I couldn't stand that song when I played Raoul and had to hear it every night. I just thought, oh God, eh. And when Hal cast me as the Phantom, I really wasn't looking. I was like, eh, until I got in rehearsal in a little room with him, and he broke it down for me, and finally. I was like, oh, that's what this is about. And Gillian Lynn then worked with me on the blocking and gave me, and it's loaded with, this, it's loaded with sex. And David Caddick gave me a brilliant idea of, Hugh, because I love to be loud. You don't have to be loud all the time. You can find nuance. Think of it like an obscene phone call. You're whispering this in her ear sometimes. So, um, in terms of when I sing the song, I literally I literally have every note Al Prince ever gave me in my brain, in my ear. Um, it's so that I want to say that's not the hard part. The hard part is, especially in performance, if you're sick or have a cold or something, and you're trying to get through it. and you're aware of like, ugh, I sound like trash tonight, and you know that there is some fan out there going, oh, he doesn't sound very good. It's like it's inevitable. Like the one night you're having vocal trouble, somebody has their tape recorder and puts it on the internet. And but it's interesting. I will say, having done it a lot now in symphony concerts and doing it in the show, I think I'm singing it more, still with the same intention, perhaps, that Hal gave me, but maybe a little bit more like Hugh than Eric. I've always adapted my voice to each character. Marius is not going to sound like Eric. Eric is not going to sound like Lestat. Lestat is not going to sound like Bobby and company. You find you know what I'm saying, that you find the character's voice, and when you're in the show 8 shows a week, because of all of the arc of the vocals, the score that Andrew Lloyd Webber wrote so brilliantly, you go from the first scene and then you end up, in the final layer where he's completely, in unbridled. And so your voice takes on an arc because of where it has to kind of go and live. And some moments are childlike, some are bombastic, some are frail, whatever. But now, because I'm not doing 8 shows of Phantom a week, singing Music of the Night is maybe a bit more just in my voice, but still with Hal's subtext and interpretation, if that makes sense.
Okay, well, then that brings up a different question, I guess. How much more challenging is it for you to be Hugh Panaro on stage as opposed to being the characters you've played?
I love it. I I love it because for so many years, I think I was afraid of Hugh Panaro's shadow. And I think that's why it's so comfortable for actors to hide behind roles. And this is, I don't want to get too like deep, but we're all, our parents, most of us, our parents are probably the two most influential people in our lives. And for so many years, I realized that I was performing to please my mom and dad. I wanted their approval. I wanted them to think I was good. And I don't know that was always the most authentic me, because I was not performing. I was performing for someone else, so for the wrong reasons. And both of my mom and dad are no longer on the planet. And I was lucky enough to be with them both in hospice and literally my mom took her last arms breath in my arms. And it was a very um, growing up moment for me with both of them. And now I am doing it completely for me. And um,
That's
I'm
so
not.
Rose, that's so Rose's turn of you.
Stand away, world, get off of my man. I want to play Rose. That's my dream role. It can happen nowadays. Come on.
Anything's
What? I got
possible.
to put that out in the universe. No, I mean,
Absolutely.
seriously. It is, yeah. I thought you did it for me, Mama.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of us have gone through that journey of trying to
Yeah.
please our parents, and
Oh,
hopefully we wise up about how impossible that is ultimately, and how it's not good for us earlier as opposed to later.
I remember I did an independent film called Broadway Damage, and they gave me a haircut. You know how they style you for a movie, and I will never forget. Right after that, I did a show called Sweet Adeline at City Center, and my mother went off on my hair. She didn't care about my performance, but how quote ridiculous. What did she? She said, "Oh, you look ridiculous with that Ishkabibble haircut." And she did like a note session on And it really undermined a lot of confidence. Um, my mom was an actress and did dinner theater with me when I was little. And she was quite a talented actor and an opera singer in her day. And when I opened as Marius on Broadway in Les Mis, my dad, I think, cried through the whole show, and my mom gave me notes afterwards. And that was pretty much that was normal. That was
Right.
normal for me.
Which is
So
which in and of itself is abnormal.
yeah, yeah,
But that was
yeah.
born out of the crazy thing is that was born out of love.
Oh, absolutely. I always, my mom was tough. So when I was 15, I was the Artful Dodger, and I wore Husky Plus from Sears. I was quite bullied for my weight and being pigeon-toed and being the church organist. And a lot of people know this. I was Fairy, Fatso, Faggot, Fat Albert, Baby Huey, you name it. It was really not fun. And so, opening night of Oliver, I thought I was pretty darn good at 15 with my little Cockney accent, and I just thought I was very pleased with myself. And on the car ride home, my mom said, "You know that scene in Act Two before It's a Fine Life reprise?" I said, "Yeah, of course." She goes, "Well, in those striped pants bent over the fireplace, your ass took up that whole stage. If you're going to be an actor, Huey, you got to lose weight now. Otherwise, the choice is yours. You can gain some more weight and just be a fat character actor. The choice is yours." And kept driving. And I was so crushed, but in hindsight, the gauntlet had been thrown down by her. And the next day, I started jogging and dieting. And that summer, I went from 175 to 125 in about 4 months. Not the best thing I could have done because I was depriving myself of calories and running like 5 miles a day. But it was my way of showing her, oh yeah, you want to see if I take it seriously? And she never said a word the whole time I was doing it. My father even said, "Why isn't he eating?" And she like elbowed him. I remember that at the dinner table.
Well, and for people who are watching this interview, this is in the days before Ozempic when all I had to do was take a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, she would call that tough love. I tell that story. I'm sure I've told it to many a therapist in my day, and everyone can have their take on it. But I also do believe that the all of that does form who we are and what we can bring to these characters. And believe me, a lot of that bullied, tormented child was brought to Phantom and served me quite well for that show.
Probably served you well for Sweeney Todd too.
Yeah, in different ways. Yes,
Yeah, of
absolutely.
course. All right. So earlier in this interview, I said that I would bring this around to cocktails. Um, because yeah, and I want to conclude with this because in the same Broadway World interview that I referenced earlier, you were asked where you'd be in 10 years. And amongst the things you mentioned were being in Italy, spending time at the beach, making homemade pasta, and drinking Negronis. So
Yeah,
I'm
with my
wondering, yeah, what do you have a recipe for the perfect Negroni?
You know what? The perfect Negroni, according to everything if you Google it, it is equal parts Campari, gin, and red vermouth. I personally like a little bit more gin. So let's say we're doing uh 2 ounces of gin. I would probably do 1.5 ounces of Campari and then the same amount uh, of
Red vermouth.
vermouth. But do I have it on my bar? I don't know if I have it. I do. Hold on. Don't move. This wasn't a plan. Okay, so I'm not a paid spokesman. I use half. of this red vermouth, and then I use half of this red vermouth to total 1.5 ounces. Do I get a free bottle? And 1.5 ounces combined, 1.5 ounces of Campari, and then I do 2 ounces of gin. And then this is what I also saw the bartender do in Italy was a few shakes of orange bitters to top it all off. And you are in heaven.
See, I like orange bitters if I'm going to have a Prohibition era gin martini where it's equal parts gin and vermouth, and but you add that orange bitters in it, and it it mitigates what is challenging about both of those alcohols.
I will have to try it. I've never done that. I've never done that. Usually, I'm usually a dirty vodka martini.
Yeah, I'm normally a dry, very dry martini.
Okay, me too. Yeah, I just
Yeah,
want a whisper of vermouth.
yeah. Put a little bit in the bottom of the glass, rinse it just
Yeah.
out, and then I'm done.
Yeah. I love bartending. That's another one of my passions. I love bartending. I love entertaining and making things for people and yeah.
Well, good. Well, you'll definitely be making things for people on your West Coast tour with the man behind the mask. But I'm
Hopefully.
not going to let you go without asking you one more time. What would Mandy Patinkin sound like singing Music of the Night?
Oh gosh. Can I, is there something else can I do? Like, can I do like dot dot setting, dot dot getting, fat, 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 finish the hat, finish the hat. It's easier to do any song than let me see. I don't know. I don't know. That was,
Fair
did that
enough.
did that count enough?
We still got the impersonation on
Yeah.
recorded. That's
Yeah.
good.
All right.
Well, thank you very much for your time. This has been a total delight.